Hi everyone, Elisa here, and in this video, I am going to do a mock behavioral interview for a product manager position. So if you saw my last video, I gave some tips on how to do a great behavioral interview for a product manager position, but I wanted to actually put that advice into practice and show you what a behavioral interview could look like. So let's dive into the interview. All right, so usually in behavioral interviews, you start out the call with maybe a minute or two of small talk, and then oftentimes you do introductions, and that's where the interviewer will ask you the tell me about yourself question. And then generally after that first bit, that's when you dive into the behavioral questions. So in this video, we're gonna skip through all that intro stuff and dive right into behavioral questions. And in my responses, I am going to respond using the Nugget plus SAR methodology. So stay tuned and let's see how it goes.
All right. So can you talk me through one of the projects you led from start to finish?
Sure. Let me tell you about a time where I was able to build a solution for a prospect that had a feature request for us. So this was when I was working at company XYZ, which is a fintech company where I was the product manager. And at this time, I was building out a brand new product that was set to be announced at our upcoming user conference. So I was working hard on that new product. And then one week at our team meeting, the CPO mentioned that there was a key prospect that was willing to sign on with us and pay an additional lump sum if we were to build a custom feature for them. So at that point, the CPO wasn't convinced that that was something we definitely should build. But I realized that because we were working on this brand new architecture that was really configurable and flexible, I knew that we could leverage a lot of the architecture of this new product to build out a feature for this customer. And I had a hunch that we could build it in a relatively short amount of time. So after the product meeting, I met with the engineering lead on my team to see if we could use our configurable architecture to build out this new feature. And after talking it through with him, he thought that we would only need about 3 weeks to build out the UI for this feature. So once I spoke to him about that, I then spoke with some of our customer success managers to see if there were customers that could benefit from this feature. And after speaking with them, it was really clear that customers would be really excited about the feature and they would gain a lot of value from it. So after the discussions with the engineering team and with the success managers, I met with my product director and then the CPO and told them how I could build this new feature in a matter of weeks, and that we could actually even pitch this new feature as a brand new feature for all customers to have at the upcoming user conference. So it would be a huge win for our customers because it'd be a free feature, and it would be a really big win for the engineering team who was working on this brand new architecture. So we ended up doing some prioritization adjustments in our roadmap, and we spent the next few weeks building out this feature for the customer. They were able to build it in 3 weeks, just as the team estimated, and we were able to close the deal with the prospect and collect our lump sum. So later that year, we then announced the feature at our conference and turned on the feature for all customers. The feature had really high adoption and customers were really excited about it. I got to lead a few sessions at our user conference specifically about this feature. And also the engineering team was really excited about this feature because it really validated this future architecture that they were working on.
Now, from my experience, interviewers will generally dig into how you prioritized your work in that scenario. Something like this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So your team had to take 3 weeks to build out this new feature. What did you have to deprioritize in order to deliver this feature in time for the user conference, and how did you make that prioritization decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before even doing any work on this feature, I again made sure to validate that this functionality would be valuable to our customers, not just to this one prospect. So I did that by speaking with our customer success team, who very clearly indicated that many customers would be excited to have this feature. So at that point, I assessed all of my team's work for the upcoming quarter and did a reprioritization. And I wanted to go through all the initiatives that they had and see what the value to customers was, as well as the time to value for each of their initiatives. So I had 2 engineering teams at the time, and one was working on finishing this new product that we were set to announce at the upcoming user conference. And so that kind of core team really wasn't able to deprioritize any of their work for this new feature. However, when I prioritized the work of my second team, I was able to slot this new feature above some of their other features that they were doing. So this second team was working on revamping a grid view of one of our more legacy products. This was definitely valuable to customers, but there was a lot less urgency there because it wasn't a highlight at our upcoming user conference. So I reprioritized this second team's work so that first they would work on this new feature, and then they would return back to improving that grid view for the legacy product.
So again, almost every product manager behavioral interview, you'll have to talk about prioritization. And a lot of times interviewers will also dig in to see how engineers reacted to that reprioritization, because it can be really tough for engineers to be working on something and dedicating all their time to something, only to realize that their work is getting deprioritized.
Okay. And how did your second team feel about the reprioritization of work?
Yeah, they were actually really excited about it. I talked through the reason why this feature was important, and I even shared some of my recorded conversations that I had with the customer success team. I also told them that this would be an announcement at our user conference, which really conveyed the fact that this was high priority and it was also a high visibility project. I was also really clear that the grid work was not unimportant. I didn't want them to feel like they were doing unimportant work at all. And so I made sure it was clear that they would be picking that work back up as soon as this new feature was complete.
Now, oftentimes in a behavioral interview, you have about 30 to 45 minutes total. And the way that generally breaks down is you'll have about 10 minutes of introductions and the tell me about yourself question. Then you'll have maybe 20 minutes in the middle to talk about behavioral questions. And then you'll have some time at the end where the candidate can actually ask the interviewer questions. So a lot of times you'll have maybe 2 to 3 different behavioral questions that are asked throughout the course of your behavioral interview. So let's dive into one more question that often comes up during a product manager behavioral interview.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So just to switch gears quickly, can you tell me about a time where you made a mistake or failed?
Definitely. I'll tell you about a time where I released a product feature that did not really solve customer needs and actually introduced some new friction for our customers. So this was when I was working at company ABC, where I was a product manager. So for many months, we as a company had heard from customers that the experience of creating a new document was really challenging and confusing in our product. And this is kind of a core functionality of the product. So it should be something we're really good at. At the time, I owned the document creation experience. And so I dug into this issue by watching a lot of full story sessions, speaking with our customer facing teams, and then conducting a lot of customer interviews so that I could fully understand the challenges that customers were experiencing. I ended up identifying a few core parts of the document creation process that were particularly hard for customers. And those friction points were also points of drop off. So people would start creating a document, they would get frustrated, and then they just stop even trying. So as with most projects, I brought the problem to the engineering and UX teams, and I defined the problem and the scenario we wanted to solve for. And then the team did an ideation session that I facilitated. So Unfortunately, what I failed to do during this ideation session was to put in proper guardrails. So I let the team do a very open-ended ideation session. And after brainstorming, the UX designer came up with a full redesign for the document creation process. I thought the designs looked really cool, and so did the engineering team. And also, the engineering team didn't expect it to be a huge amount of work to do this redesign. So the engineering team kind of worked on breaking down the project, and the designer and I did some customer interviews. Though in retrospect, during our customer interviews, we asked very leading questions that led to polite and validating responses from customers. So we weren't getting a lot of good information from those customer interviews, and I'll circle back to that in a bit. So as time went on, the project ended up taking much longer to build than expected, as you would expect with any redesign project. And when we finally released the project, customers were pretty unhappy. They did not like that we completely changed the user experience, and it actually added a lot more friction to our customers, especially experienced customers, instead of making it easier to use.
Okay, I have to jump in here, even though I'm in the middle of that mock behavioral interview. I keep using the word we in this answer. And sometimes in product, you are working as a team, and it really does feel like we is the appropriate word. However, if I were to redo this mock behavioral interview, I would really focus on what I specifically was doing so that the interviewer knows exactly what my personal contributions were, as opposed to what the total contributions of the full team were. Anyway, let's go back to the video.
So we did, thank goodness, implement a widget in-app that asked for feedback on the redesign. And we reached out to all of the people who left poor reviews. We received hundreds of reviews overall, and were able to get in touch with about half of the customers who left those reviews. And after a month of fast follow releases, we were finally able to make the experience better and started receiving about 70% positive feedback from customers. And we finally noticed that the time it actually took to create a document and finalize it was finally decreasing. So although it was okay after a month of fast follows, the project did end up taking much longer than expected. And then we had to even add on another month of fast follows to fix what we felt we had broken. Although we could remedy the situation, there are a few things I learned from this experience.
Now, although it feels kind of uncomfortable to talk about your failures or mistakes, it's really important for a product manager to be able to talk about those experiences, and maybe even more importantly, talk about the learnings that you got from that experience and how you carried those learnings forward. So whenever I'm asked that question, I like to make sure that I end with a bulleted list of learnings that I have from the experience, and then talk through how I carried those learnings forward in all of my product initiatives after that.
There are a few things I learned from this experience. So first of all, I always need to put in guardrails for ideation sessions with the engineering team. So instead of leaving something very open-ended, I always make it a point to tell the team how much time we want to invest into an initiative. And I also indicate what parts of the product we really want to focus on. Second, I always keep in mind that change is really hard for customers. So anytime I'm doing a redesign, it's really important to keep in mind that change is hard, and it's really easy to introduce new friction and frustration for existing customers when something completely changes in a product they're familiar with. Third, I learned that it's really critical to be objective in customer interviews. So it's okay, and actually a good thing, if you're getting bad feedback up front, because that means you won't invest a ton of time into an initiative that isn't actually providing value. And then last but not least, whenever possible, especially with these redesign type projects, it's really helpful to try and break down those major projects into digestible chunks so that risk is a little bit reduced for your releases. And this isn't always possible in redesign initiatives or in other major initiatives, but it's important to at least assess if there's a possibility to break down that work. Is there anything else you'd like to learn about my product experiences?
To be honest, I don't think so. I think you he knocked this out of the park and is a great behavioral interview. And I think we're going to hire you. So great job.
Awesome.
Now, obviously, that's not exactly how your behavioral interviews will end. You can expect them to end with maybe 5 to 10 minutes where you, as the candidate, can ask the interviewer some questions, and then the call will likely wrap up. So I hope this was a good example for you of how a behavioral interview is conducted, and I hope it exemplified just how important it is to follow a methodology like the SAR methodology or the Nugget plus SAR methodology when you're answering questions. So there you have it. That's an example of a couple behavioral interview questions that you might be asked when you're interviewing for a product manager position. So I hope this video was helpful for you, and if you have a behavioral interview coming up, I hope you're able to use this as an example of how you can answer your behavioral questions. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to hear more content from me, please subscribe. Thank you so much, and happy interviewing. Bye, friends.